With the Overwatch League May Melee tournament now well behind us and with still a couple of weeks until play resumes, I thought it would be a great opportunity to finally revisit my power rankings and update them for the first time since the start of the season. I'm sure many of you have seen other people's power rankings over the past couple of months, such as from Reinforced and Avast, but there doesn't seem to be a consensus about whether to split power rankings between the two regions or instead if all the teams should be combined together into just one ranking. So, for today I've decided to do both. Initially I will discuss the regions individually, before mixing the two together at the end of the video, but for future reference I'd be happy to hear your opinions on which system you prefer down in the comments below. Let us begin with the North American region, and this is currently what I have down for their power rankings. So, how about I discuss each team's position individually, starting with the Vancouver Titans at 13. This spot is not at all a knock on their performance during the May Melee tournament, as despite being eliminated in the qualifier, the Titans were incredibly impressive in their narrow 3-2 defeat to the Defiant. Shockwave had an impactful DPS performance on debut, and for the first time since they've come together, this new Vancouver squad at times looked structured and competitive during the series, with players like KSAA continuing to shine. That said though, I think that a lack of a hero pool during the May Melee did help them with their preparation, and considering that this is their first strong performance on the back of 3-0 defeats, and only against a rather weak opponent, it's difficult for me to place them any higher at this moment. All things considered however, this isn't something to be looked down upon Vancouver fans, as the May Melee did highlight a lot of promise and potential on this team, but should only reveal itself more during the rest of the season as the players continue to improve and establish more synergy with one another. If there was going to be a team that they might have swapped with, it would have been the Washington Justice, who I ended up putting at 12. May was not a kind month for the Justice at all, following the departure of their fan favourite DPS duo of Corey and Stratus, as well as the release of their GM Ballin and one of their coaches Barney. In his final game as a Washington player, Stratus did lead the team to a victory over Vancouver, but since then they've only seemed to get worse week by week. In my opinion, they probably looked the worst of any team during the May Melee in their quick, one-sided defeat to the Gladiators, and I worry that it will not be long before they reach the bottom of these rankings if they continue to underperform. There is some cause for hope following the official permanent signings of Stitch and Janu to the team, but the pair still looked to be adjusting to the lineup during their last couple of matches, and even if they were to perform to their peaks, I'd find it difficult to see them carry Washington during their upcoming matches, so I definitely believe more help is required if they want to turn things around. At 11 I decided to put the Toronto Defiant, who in all honesty haven't had the worst past month. They were unlucky to face a string of tough opponents in the run-up to the May Melee, and although it was close, in the end the quality of their star players like Logix and Kriv saw them over the line against a much improved performance from the Titans, but their elimination by Atlanta highlighted they still have a long way to go before they can even compete with other middle-of-the-pack sides. Whilst I have liked their recent addition of Cruz to the backline, who brings with him experience and in-game leadership, Zik had a below-average first showing at DPS, and overall they just feel like a squad still in need of more improvement at tank and DPS before they see their fortunes change. And look at that, they just picked up Nunlock today, a step in the right direction. This brings us on to the Boston Uprising at 10, who are really on the up at the minute. Following the arrival of Punk at off-tank a couple of weeks ago, this whole team is seemingly levelled up, with Jerry and Colorhex making an impact together at DPS. Fusion's refining his mojo alongside consistently good displays from Punk, whilst Myeongbong has stood out also, particularly on his Ana. Momentum from an impressive win over the Gladiators a week prior was carried forward into a tough contest between the Uprising and the Eternal, but Boston only just lost 3-2. For the first time in a while, the mood will be a positive one in Boston. However, they need to ensure they keep up this level of play when they return after his short break if they want to remain at this sort of position. Next at 9 are the Houston Outlaws, who continue to be a difficult team to evaluate week by week. They put up a good fight during the May Melee against a Dallas side that was spurred on by a fantastic Decay performance, and whilst up to now they've looked their best on dive, Hydration's recent sub-ins at main tank have led to improvements on some other Ryan and Orisa compositions. I think the key going forward for the Outlaws will be consistency, which is a problem that has plagued them throughout this year. That's if they want to be looking at a play-in push during the second half of the season, but for now their recent matches have given me enough confidence to place them in this lower middle of the pack position. Above Houston I have the Atlanta Reign at 8 and the LA Gladiators at 7. Both of these teams had similar displays during the May Melee, with comfortable knockout victories over weak opponents, before being defeated by much stronger teams in the quarterfinals. The consensus seems to be that these two teams could be doing so much better than they currently are, and therefore they are still yet to reach the potential that their talented rosters possess. The Reign had a tough schedule leading into the May Melee, and whilst they weren't bad in their defeats, it did feel like they lacked consistency and team cohesion from week to week, and this was really emphasised in their 3-2 reverse sweep defeat to the Valiant a month ago, where the team just fell flat after half time. The form that this team showed at the end of 2019 hasn't really materialised in 2020, and Erster's absence of late is a question that is still unanswered. The Gladiators' May Melee was a good rebound for the team following a rough stretch of matches in May, concluding in a surprising loss to Boston. Their bounce-back win against Washington and following match against Philly highlighted that this team found success when there were contributions across the board, rather than from just one player standing out, and it's this greater level of team play which is why I have them just above Atlanta. Their DPS line has been much better than I expected, with Mirror and Birdering putting in some impressive recent displays, but lately there's seemingly been a little bit of a disconnect between the support line and the tank line, which was heavily exploited in their May melee elimination by Philly. As I mentioned before, both of these teams have the pieces to be much higher in these rankings, but until they can string together a strong run of results, they'll both remain in just middle of the pack sides. The Dallas Fuel at 6 may be a little controversial, given that of late it has been Decay running the show. There are moments with Dallas where indeed it does feel like they are only finding success, when Decay, often backed up by Doha, is putting the team on his back and propelling them to success. Their loss to Paris in the run-up to the May melee probably highlighted the struggles facing the Fuel, when Decay can't play up to his high level, especially when Tracer is banned, and I expect that it will be in hero pools where heroes like Tracer and Widow are banned that Dallas may struggle. It is important to state though, that whilst Decay is taking the plaudits, it's not to say that the rest of the team around him aren't making significant contributions themselves. Just like when he was on Element Mystic, Doha is a silent hero for this Fuel side, with his support and assistance alongside Decay really giving him the space and freedom to pop off. Another standout player for this team has been Crimzo, who has enjoyed consistently strong displays at flex support. The fact that this team has recently taken a map off of both San Francisco and the Fusion demonstrates they are a good team, and although perhaps this reliance on Decay may come back to haunt them down the road, right now I'd favour Dallas in a match against both Atlanta and the Gladiators, which is why I have them above both. It may confuse some of you to see the LA Valiant at 5 and the Paris Eternal at 4, considering that the Valiant went up against the Eternal in the May melee and defeated them 3-2. That 3-2 though came against a Parasite that was certainly not at their full power. I want to take nothing away from the Valiant, who have enjoyed an amazing past month, going undefeated in their May regular season matches on the back of excellent team performances, fronted by their DPS duo of KSP and Shax, and that's why they are totally deserving of a placement this high. Paris though, like the Valiant, have had a particularly good run of form of late, against much tougher opponents I might add, and that's with Fielder playing on high ping and Exy being sidelined with an injury. Add into the mix the fact that Sparkle has now just turned 18, thereby becoming eligible. A potential debut for him alongside a returning Exy promises to produce fireworks should he manage to reach the heights he showed on Element Mystic. Subsequently, it makes it difficult for me to put the Valiant over Paris right now, even on the back of a 3-2 win against them. Although should both of these teams continue to play well, they should be looking very good for playoff or playing qualification come the end of the season. The top 3 should come as little surprise to anyone, with Philly coming in at 3, the Florida Mayhem taking the second spot, and the San Francisco Shock being number 1. Heading into the May melee, these 3 teams on paper looked to be the strongest, and the only real surprise involving them during the tournament itself was how convincingly the Mayhem were able to get past the Fusion. Carpe stood out for Philly during their win over the Gladiators, but he couldn't repeat similar heroics against Florida, and whilst the team will be disappointed with perhaps a surprising early exit, with talent like Alarm and Fury performing well of late alongside many other top players on that Fusion squad, there doesn't seem to be any threat of this team tumbling down the power rankings anytime soon. The Mayhem though were clearly the big winners coming out of the May melee, even despite their final defeat. For the past 2 months they've been playing really well, but it took a tournament like this to finally convince people that they were the real deal, and a team that can be considered alongside Philly and the Shock at the top of NA. Admittedly, their matches leading into the May melee weren't the hardest, and talent-wise I would still say the Fusion have a stronger lineup. But as a team, Florida have been far more coordinated and disciplined of late, with everyone in the side making valuable and impressive contributions, particularly from Yaki, Gangnam Jin and Gargoyle, and that's why I think they deserve to be in second place. The number 1 spot, however, is no real contest. I may have had my doubts heading into the May melee about the Shock, but they dispelled them here with 3 quality displays that you would expect to come from a championship winning side. What I think the final showed is that whilst they are the best team currently in North America, San Francisco aren't as strong as they were last year, and indeed the competition overall has gotten better. But factor in now that they have Twilight to cover the side on Ana, and if they need to run double flex support comps, and the Shock are in a brilliant position to continue their dominance over the region. Let's now move on to the Asian region, which I feel is a lot easier to position the teams, and indeed in an order that few can really argue against. One of the biggest complaints I've seen on YouTube and Twitter though regards the placement of London at the bottom of the Asian power rankings. Spitfire fans may be happy to hear then that I have them above Chengdu at 6, whilst the Hunters are at 7. One important thing to note in regards to both of these teams is my belief overall that the Asian region is much stronger than the NA region as a collective, and whilst Chengdu and London might find themselves at the bottom here, that's not at all to say that they're bad teams, the opposite is true. The Hunters entered the May Melee on the back of a brilliant demolition of Seoul, following this up with an extremely competitive 5-map series against New York, in which they came up just short. In London's May Melee match against the Dragons meanwhile, Shanghai did appear to play poorly in their sloppy 3-2 win over the Spitfire. However, it cannot be denied that London themselves were fantastic. Glister and Orvo were lethal on the DPS line, and Bernard enjoyed a strong series himself at off-tank. This was just one performance though, and aside from their win over the Hunters at the start of May, the rest of their May regular season matches were unconvincing. However, moving forward I can see the Spitfire continuing to cause problems for other teams in Asia, and considering that their roster is still young and full of potential, their future looks bright. For Chengdu, they themselves should look to continue their recent momentum, taking advantage of their talented DPS duo, impressive recent displays from Molly and Lengser at support, and the team's unique playstyle. What lets both of these teams down at this moment in time is consistency. We've seen that they both have the potential to cause upsets and challenge some of the top teams in Asia. They now need to do it more regularly before I'm happy to move them up the rankings. Just above them at 5 I decided to put the Hangzhou Spark. The Spark were the team in Asia that arguably had the weakest showing, with a surprising and quick 3-0 defeat to the Seoul Dynasty in the May Melee. I think a big reason for this was Hangzhou's poor read on the no hero pool meta, with their Ryan Sigma Torb comps getting very little value against the dive and double shield from the Dynasty. Just for this one performance they did look worse than Chengdu in London, but considering that they enjoyed a relatively successful month of May before the Melee, as well as the fact that Seoul ended up being one of the strongest performers during this tournament, makes me believe that dropping them any lower than 5th would be a bit harsh. Add to this their new addition of Architect to the squad, who I think will be an excellent supporting partner to Godsby on the DPS line, finally balancing the team as a whole. This should put the Spark in a strong position to challenge in Asia in the near future. New York lands on these rankings at number 4. The Excelsior are one of the oddest teams to examine because they feel like they should be a top team, but just when you want to put faith in them, they then disappoint. The May Melee proved to be a rough event for this side, as they only just managed to scrape past the Hunters before then being picked apart easily by Shanghai. For those that will ask why they are above London, who played Shanghai much closer, I would argue that Shanghai performed far better during their series against New York, and also it should not be forgotten that comparatively, the Excelsior were far better during their regular season May matches than the Spitfire were. Like Hangzhou, New York also seem to have a questionable read on the meta, with some of their compositions really holding them back. It's hard to understand what their biggest issue is, given that talent shouldn't be much of a factor considering the quality players the Excelsior have on their roster. Just from this past month though, the two things I've noticed have been a poor level of coordination between frontline and backline, with Mano often getting caught out early on his own, with the other issue I've seen being the inconsistency on the DPS line, with the team regularly chopping and changing between Huayu and Libero. Right now this middle spot in Asia feels like a good fit, and I'll be looking closely at New York over the next month to establish whether they are as good as their record suggests, or instead, if yet again they are setting themselves up for playoff disappointment down the line. At 3 I decided to go with the Guangzhou Charge, although I did consider closely whether to put them above Seoul. There isn't too much to say about the Charge following a very successful May, but saw the team earn the top seed for the Asian May Melee on the back of 4 wins. Whilst they did end up losing to Seoul in their semi-final, it was only by a whisker, and I think this team has proven they are the real deal in Asia for these past few weeks, with fantastic performances from everyone in the lineup, with Nero and Krong particularly standing out for me personally. Aside from their loss to Seoul, my only hesitation with this team is that they haven't played Shanghai recently, and I think a series against the Dragons is needed to determine whether Guangzhou are a serious long-term challenger in the Asian region, or whether they just hit a good run of form in May. As I mentioned before, the Seoul Dynasty are at number 2, a spot that I can understand some may not agree with. Despite coming into the May Melee as the lowest seed, the Dynasty defied expectations by making it all the way to the final, where they came up a map short, and even at times a team fight short of winning it all. At the end of the day, a reverse sweep hurts, but it highlighted how a lack of a quality Echo player really hurt Seoul when they needed it most. That said, despite their matches in May highlighting this team flip-flopping in quality between different compositions, it must be said that during the May Melee, Echo aside, they looked like a completely different outfit when it came to running dive or rush compositions. No longer were they comparable to a bottom 3 side, rather a serious threat, and it's for this reason that I thought they should be placed above the Charge. If this team can build up some consistency now into June, then they without a doubt should be treated as one of the top teams in Asia, if not the league. But there are 2 areas of focus that they definitely need to address if they want this to happen. First, they need to get a good Echo player, and secondly, they need to sort out the off-tank position, as both Marvel and Michelle have failed to find form here, limiting Dynasty's options and potential when they can't play double shield. Finally at 1 we have the Shanghai Dragons. Up to now I think universal opinion has had the Dragons as the top team in Asia, although at times during the May Melee they risk losing this title. They underperformed drastically during their series against London and almost got completely swept by Seoul before they began their heroic comeback in the final. Across the board, this team has been brilliant, from Fletcher and Lip dominating at DPS to Fearless producing an MVP performance that led his team back during the final. If I had one concern at all, it would be the consistent commitment to swapping out Fearless for stand 1 at main tank. I can understand doing this during regular season matches for the purpose of sharing experience, but when your team is in a knockout scenario, I don't think this is the right move. And clearly at this point, Fearless has proven and shown he is the one you can trust in this scenario, so hopefully this doesn't become an issue that affects them down the line. So, now that we've had a look at both regions' power rankings individually, I guess I should now put together roughly what I think a combined power ranking would look like. So here it is. As I explained at the start of the video, it was difficult to really put this one together given the major disparities and differences between the two regions, but I will try to explain a couple of the position choices I made. London, as I mentioned before, are in my opinion better than a lot of NA teams, and I thought in terms of a cross comparison that they suited a spot alongside Atlanta and the Gladiators, which is why I have them here. The hardest decision for me regarded where to place New York and Hangzhou, and in the end I settled on just above the Fuel, as I think in terms of overall quality, both of these squads have the greater talent, even if they struggle like Dallas with some recent consistency. Seoul at 5 may surprise some, but I think they've proven themselves to be a top team. However, until they can regularly perform in regular season matches, I cannot place them any higher. The last point of potential contention comes to the number 1 spot, where I opted to place a Shock above the Dragons. Too often I think people penalise San Francisco for their early season losses to the LA side, which I think is well behind them. Instead, if we look at their most recent matches, whilst the Dragons might have had greater peaks in performance, I personally believe the Shock have been more dominant. Let us not forget that Shanghai have recently lost to Seoul and were fortunate not to lose to them again, and indeed in an upset to London. Quite clearly though, these are the top 2 teams in the league, and right now they'd have to be your favourites for the championship at the end of the season. On that note though, we've reached the end of my post-May Melee power rankings, and if you've reached the end of the video, then I'd like to thank you for watching. Apologies for the absence of videos over the past week, as there's been a few technical difficulties, but they're hopefully all fixed now. So if you have enjoyed and don't want to miss out on future videos, then please be sure to like, subscribe or follow me on Twitter or at my Discord. But until next time, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.